Hello everybody, this is Curtis with Campfire Tales Cryptids of America. And if you hear trucks in the background, it's because we are this for the next few weeks in Glen Rose, Texas. And the highway that passes through is Highway 67, and it is used extensively by semis. Campground's not too far from the road. It's a place called Bison Hill RV Park. And let me tell you, it's pretty sweet. And if not for the trucks, it'd be one of my tops. Anyhow, today I'm going to read to you something I found on the internet, and I found kind of interesting. I found it at grunge.com, and it's the bizarre true story of Bigfoot, America's missing ape. So we begin. Every part of the world has its legends, whether they are elves, jinns, or green-suited little bearded men perched at the end of the rainbow. In the United States and Canada, our local mythological figure is a bipedal, hairy primate that goes by the strange name Bigfoot. When the big old ape isn't tromping around the woods with its size 30-something feet, he's getting his pictures snapped by photographers, having his language secretly recorded, or starring in beef jerky commercials. For as long as human beings have looked into the forest shadows, they've speculated about whether Bigfoot is out there, whether these creatures are real or not. People have been telling stories about Bigfoot encounters for centuries, across many cultures and regions, to the point where even the most fervent disbeliever has to at least raise an eyebrow. Either way, Bigfoot is one of North America's greatest icons. Here's the true story about how this big-souled gorilla man became a big deal. If Bigfoot is real, he didn't just traipse into the country sometime after the U.S. Constitution was signed. One of the most fascinating parts of Bigfoot mythology is the fact that a tall, hairy man-like figure plays a key role in the in the mythologies of numerous North American indigenous people, according to native language. For example, the Sioux believed in a powerful, burly figure they called Chitanka, Chiytanka, or I suppose it translates into Big Elder Brother. The Cheyenne tribe told tales of an aloof, hairy man named Maximista, Maxemista, who may have played a key role in the creation story. Even the now familiar term Sasquatch is merely an Anglicization, being Anglicized, I suppose, of the more Halkomelem name. And let me spell this Halkomelem, because I doubt I'm saying it right. Halkomelem name, which is Saskets, Sasquets. Different tribes each had their own take on the Bigfoot figure, but for the most part, very few saw the creature as being monstrous, aggressive, or evil. Rather, as described by Indian country today, Bigfoots place in many tribal mythologies was that of a gentle guardian, a protector, a keeper of the earth. Over the centuries, as the Bigfoot legend has grown, the Oregon Historical Society states that Native Americans in Oregon have increasingly come to see Bigfoot as an important piece of their culture with great significance to their history. As we know today, North America was fated to become the landing dock of countless European settlers. From the 1600s onward, these Europeans experienced their own alleged Bigfoot encounters. Though the colonizers found the creatures a lot scarier than the native people usually did, one of the more popular historical writings among cryptozoology aficionados is a 1604 passage from French navigator Samuel de Champlain, who ominously described a frightful monster which the savages called Gou. So Gugu. Okay. Though Champlain said Gugu was an enormous feminine beast that devoured human beings and made horrible noises, his description was vague enough that reading it today, Gugu could have been anything from Bigfoot to a swamp monster. Champlain decided that Gugu was an unholy evil of some sort because, well, what Europeans said about every weird phenomenon back then. And as the New World was increasingly colonized, reports of encounters with more distinctly Bigfoot-like creatures continued trickling in. In 1811, according to Rolling Stone, explorer David Thompson was hiking through the Rockies when he stumbled upon some serious massive Bigfoot prints, which he followed for nearly 100 yards before the trail went cold. One of the biggest stories appeared in the July 1884 edition of a British Columbia newspaper called the Daily Colonist, now archived online. The paper reported the capture of a young gorilla-like primate called Jocko. Was Jocko a young Bigfoot? A hoax? A stunt? You decide. Regardless, little Jocko was never reported on again. The 1924 Bigfoot attack in Ape Canyon. According to Slate, it was a warm summer night in July 1924, and a group of 5 miners decided to call it a night in their little homemade cabin, perched up in what is now called Ape Canyon, a little gorge found in the hike up Mount St. Helens in Washington. Allegedly, as the miners tried to get some sleep, a group of crazed, hairy ape men came screaming out of the hills and started launching heavy stones at their cabin. The creatures continued rallying on the cabin all night. At one point, even reached inside through a gaping hole in the wall and attempted to steal an axe. The whole thing sounds like a real-life Evil Dead, but with Bigfoot instead of deadies. Finally, the assault died down at daybreak, and the miners re-emerged from the cabin. One miner, Fred Beck, reported that he saw an ape man standing in the distance, so he shot the creature, sending it tumbling down into the rocks. Years later, Beck went on to propose that the hostile animals he encountered were actually ghostly beings from another reality. On the other hand, many people have speculated that the ape men were just a gang of rowdy teenagers. Either way, It sounds like a scary night. As you'd probably guess, this incident is why the particular mountain gorge is now referred to as Ape Canyon. The Bigfoot prints are found and the name Bigfoot is born. According to Rolling Stone, American ape sightings continued coming in throughout the next few decades. In 1940, a Canadian family reported an 8-foot ape man had come out of the woods and broken into their shed, leaving 16-inch footprints in its wake. Then one October morning in Northern California in 1958, workers for the Granite Logging Company found a series of giant footprints. Once again, 16 inches long, submerged in the damp bed of one of the newly built roads. Less than a week later, the workers spotted a creature in the woods that ran upright like a man, swinging long, hairy arms. It looked 10 feet tall. They found more footprints the next day. The local Humboldt Times picked up the story, publishing a photo of the megalithic footprint cast, with journalist Andrew Gonzalez lending the unknown creature a name that would soon become legendary, Bigfoot. The hubbub didn't stop there. At the construction site, footprints kept appearing. Equipment was flipped over. Workers reported feeling like something in the woods was watching them. And the paranoia grew so intense that 15 men quit. When Ray Wallace, a partner in the firm, was accused of perpetrating a hoax, he angrily retorted, "Who knows anything? Who knows anyone foolish enough to ruin their own business?" Makes sense to me. Anyhow, Bigfoot became big news. More tracks were discovered up in Washington, and spotting Bigfoot became a tradition as American as apple pie. Ray Wallace made a good argument for why the footprints were not a hoax caused by him. But there's the thing, as any good prankster knows, if you get caught, you're left with two options: give up or double down. Guess what Wallace chose? In 2002, according to the New York Times, Wallace died at age 84. Once Wallace's children finished laying their father to rest, the family came clean with the greatest joke that their prank-loving pop ever pulled on the world. Eventually, the famous feet were evidently the famous feet were carved with wood carvings, and Ray had slowly rolled along in a truck to create the massive gate between the tracks. Ray's son Michael told the Times, "It's weird because it was just a joke, and then it took on such a life of its own that even now we can't stop it. You know, Ray Ray would have pulled it off too if it weren't for those meddling kids." Of course, he did pull it off for over half a century. You'd think this post-mortem revelation would have hit the Sasquatch community like a baseball bat. But for the most part, believers are unfazed. That's because even though the Wallace tracks did launch a lot of Bigfoot hubbub, major Bigfoot researchers had speculated that the 1958 incident was a hoax. Besides, by 1967, those tracks were overshadowed by a far more dramatic piece of evidence. The Bigfoot video you know by heart. Maybe someday a close-up Bigfoot selfie will be posted on Instagram. Until then, the Patterson Gimlin footage remains the holy grail of Bigfoot evidence. Back in 1967, according to Australian Broadcasting Corporation, Roger Patterson approached his old rodeo buddy Bob Gimlin for the explicit purpose of finding Bigfoot after more giant tracks were found in northern California. Patterson and Gimlin set out on horseback. Unlike almost every other Bigfoot expedition in history, the pair allegedly stumbled onto the legendary creature walking along the creek, just 30 meters away. Peterson, yielding the camera, jumped off his horse in an effort to get closer. According accounting for the infamous shaky cam effect. So, was this Bigfoot dubbed Patty the real deal? Over 5 decades later, Patterson's footage has become one of the most studied video clips in history, and it's never been summarily debunked. According to Oregon Public Broadcasting, anatomy professor Jeffrey Meldrum strongly believes in the footage, theorizing that when compared to other primate special effects of the time, namely Planet of the Apes, Patty's anatomical features are much too advanced to be phony costumes. Not everyone is convinced. In 2004, the Charlotte Observer reported that costume designer Philip Morse, then deceased, claimed to have sold a gorilla suit to Roger Patterson. As for the men behind the video, Patterson died of cancer in 1972. Bob Gimlin maintains that the Bigfoot encounter truly happened and says the decades of interrogation he received because of it has ruined his life. Guys, I'm gonna close out, but before I do, um, there are lots of folks who have seen things, but they're afraid to come forward because look at Bob Gimlin. Roger Patterson passed away. God rest him. Bob Gimlin, as of this day, this is 2019, is still alive, and he still makes tours, trying to explain to people what he saw. saw. And folks, I've said this before. I know what I saw, and disbelievers can't change that. You know what you saw, and disbelievers can't change that. Telling the story is such a release. It's almost like going through counseling or therapy. Please send us an email. Okay, give us your story, and we'll include it. And you can remain anonymous. I'll just use your first name, or I'll use um, an alias for you. Just whatever you want to do. You can read it. You can talk online. I'll call you. Um, whatever and however you want to do this. Okay? And thanks again, guys. I appreciate you. Hello, everybody. This is Curtis again. And I want to thank you very much for lasting to the end. And also give you the uh, code, the product discount code to get 15% off by going to the description down below and going through the store. You want to buy some merchandise, that'd be great. Help put some shoes on my grandbaby's feet. Then go to checkout, and it is Campfire 15, all lowercase, all together. Campfire 15. Now it's a limited time only, so go spend some money. All right, bye.